My name's Leah. I'm 34. And until very recently, I thought I was doing the right thing by taking care of my parents. For most of my adult life, I've been the dependable one, the successful child, the one with a steady job, a decent apartment, and enough discipline not to spiral into chaos every time life threw a curveball. Meanwhile, my younger brother Aaron bounced from girlfriend to girlfriend, job to job. And my parents, well, they coasted. They always had an excuse for why things were tight. Your father's hours got cut, or we had to loan money to your aunt again. And I, like the loyal fool I was, kept the lights on. Literally, I started helping when I was 25. First, it was little things. Paying for mom's prescriptions, covering the overdue gas bill, helping with groceries when they were short this month. But over time, it became expected. The requests got bigger. I started paying the property taxes when Dad forgot twice. Then took over the mortgage when he was between jobs, a period that stretched 3 years and counting. Eventually, I refinanced the house to keep them from losing it. My name went on the deed. It was supposed to be temporary, a technicality, but of course, nothing about this family was ever temporary unless it benefited them. I never complained. Not when I got off work late to Venmo them money so their power wouldn't be shut off. Not when I had to cancel a trip because they accidentally used my credit card again. And definitely not when they made sly comments at dinner like, well, at least we raised one responsible adult. Usually while shooting disappointed glances at Aaron, who was too busy updating his socials to notice. But something changed this year. For the first time in nearly a decade, I had saved enough and arranged enough time off to go on an actual vacation. Not just a weekend road trip, an actual week in Spain. I booked the flights, reserved a small flat near the beach, even planned an itinerary that included nothing but sleeping, walking, and pretending I didn't exist. After years of always saying, maybe next year, I was finally doing it. I was proud. I thought stupidly that my parents would be happy for me. They were not. 2 weeks before the trip, I went over for dinner and brought it up casually, saying, hey, so I was wondering if one of you might be able to watch Rosie while I'm gone, just for a week. Rosie's my dog. Sweet, quiet, well-behaved. Rescued her 2 years ago. She loves my parents and they love her. Or so I thought. Mom didn't even look up from her phone. You mean like stay here? She asked. Yeah, I said. Just for a week. I'll leave food, her schedule, everything. Dad chuckled. You want us to babysit your dog? I mean, dog sit. Just feed her. Let her out. You guys are retired. Mom finally looked up. Leah, we're not your employees. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. I've been paying the mortgage on this place for 5 years, I said, keeping my voice calm. I figured watching Rosie for a week isn't much to ask. That's different, Mom said, standing to clear the table. That's helping family. This is an errand. An errand, I repeated, stunned. You don't even have to leave the house. She's housed. She just sleeps and eats and cuddles. Leah, you're always trying to guilt trip us, Dad added, like I was the problem. This is why Aaron doesn't like coming over anymore. Aaron, by the way, hadn't contributed a cent since he graduated from high school. He didn't believe in debt, which somehow translated to letting me shoulder theirs. But sure, blame. My tone that I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just looked around the house. The hardwood floors I paid to have refinished. The new fridge I bought after the old one died. The porch swing I installed last summer because Mom said she missed simple evenings. And I said calmly, okay, that was it. No rant, no sarcasm, just okay. Then I got up, kissed Rosie on the head, and went home. That night, I opened the folder on my laptop labeled House Docs. Then I called the property manager I used to rent out my condo when I lived abroad for 6 months. We talked for an hour. I told him I needed someone to take over within 3 weeks. Someone who could handle everything remotely. He was more than happy to help. Demand was high. I told him to find someone quiet, responsible, and I didn't want the tenants to deal with my parents directly at all. Got it, he said. They'll be notified legally with the change of leaseholder. Make it airtight. I told him I didn't want them to talk their way out of anything. Next, I booked a kennel for Rosie. It was pricey, but worth it. She'd be safe and pampered while I was gone. I finalized all the travel details, packed my bags, and left quietly. 3 days later, I was lying on a sun-warmed beach in southern Spain, sipping a drink that tasted like vacation and freedom. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. I read, I slept, I watched seagulls instead of spreadsheets. It was, in a word, perfect. Until my phone buzzed, the text was from Mom. It just said, why are there strangers on our lawn with a truck? A second later, one from Dad. Some guy says he's from a property agency. They're putting a sign up. What the hell is going on? Then the calls started. 10 in a row. I muted them all. Instead, I opened the property manager's email confirming that the new tenants would be moving in next month. A young couple relocating for work, excited to live somewhere peaceful and close to a good school district. The manager had already arranged for photos, lock changes, and utility transfers. Everything was moving forward legally, cleanly, permanently. My phone kept buzzing louder now, more insistent. But I just leaned back into my lounge chair, letting the sun warm my face as I thought about all the times I'd told myself I owed them. All the times I'd let guilt be louder than self-respect. Maybe this time they'd finally understand what earned loyalty looks like. But I knew them better than that. And just as I was about to turn my phone off entirely, another message popped up. This one, not from either of them. It was from Aaron. All it said was, "Leah, what did you do?" I stared at Aaron's message for a long minute. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned my phone off completely, tossed it into my bag, and went for a swim. I stayed in the water until my fingers wrinkled and my chest ached from laughing too hard with a group of fellow travelers I'd just met. They were strangers, but somehow in that moment, they felt more like family than the people whose house I'd been paying for half a decade. When I got back to the flat that evening, I powered my phone on again just to check in on Rosie. The kennel had sent photos of her curled up peacefully on a fluffy blanket, her tail wagging, eyes soft. At least someone was enjoying the break. Then curiosity got the better of me. I scrolled through the notifications. There were over 30 missed calls. 12 voicemails, multiple texts, some rambling, others short and frantic. But one thread stood out. A group text between my parents, Aaron, and me that I hadn't seen active in months. The last message in it had been from Mom on my birthday 4 months ago. "Sorry we couldn't make it. Hope it was a good one." No gift, no call, not even a card, just an afterthought. But now it was flooded. "Aaron, Leah, this isn't funny. You're overreacting. Just call the guy and tell him it was a mistake." "Mom, you didn't even give us warning. What kind of daughter does this?" "Dad, you're acting like some kind of corporate landlord. We're your parents, not tenants." "Aaron, Leah, you owe them more respect than this after everything they've done for you." I actually laughed out loud at that one. Respect. Respect is earned. Not something you weaponize when the free ride gets cut off. Then came the final message from Mom. "This isn't how family treats each other." That one made me pause. Not because it hurt. Not anymore. But because it was so deeply ironic that I actually whispered, "Wow," to the empty room. This isn't how family treats each other. Was family sticking your child with the mortgage while pretending you were doing them a favor? Was it refusing one small act of help after years of financial support, then playing victim when the consequences finally arrived? Was it expecting endless sacrifices from one child while making excuses for another? No, this wasn't how family treated each other, but it was how consequences worked. The next morning, I met with my property manager via video call. He was efficient, professional, and mildly entertained when I explained who the current residents were. He walked me through the official notice that had already been mailed to the house along with a digital copy for my records. Technically, he said, they have 30 days to vacate, but if they respond to the letter and agree to the move-out terms, we can make it easier for everyone. I asked if there had been any drama on the ground. He smirked. One of the neighbors said, "Your dad was out front yelling about squatters' rights." Of course, he was. I thanked him and hung up just in time for another email to ping through. This one from my attorney. I'd asked her just before the trip to draft a letter outlining a formal end to my financial support. No more bills paid, no more mortgage coverage, and most importantly, no more access to my accounts. I hadn't told my parents yet. I figured I'd save that for a face-to-face, or rather, face-to-glare. And that moment arrived faster than expected. 2 days later, I landed back home. Jet-lagged, tanned, and somehow 10 pounds lighter from shedding years of resentment. I pulled into my driveway, my actual home, not the one they'd leached from, and found someone already waiting on my porch. Aaron. He was pacing like a tiger in a cage, arms crossed, phone in one hand. The moment he saw me, he launched in. "You seriously need help?" I raised a brow, dragging my suitcase up the stairs. "Nice to see you, too." "They're freaking out, Leah. You couldn't have talked to them first?" "I did," I said calmly. "You just weren't listening. This is insane. You can't just evict your own parents." I unlocked the door and held it open. "They're welcome to find another place. Same as anyone else." He followed me inside, still ranting, but I stopped him with one sentence. "They chose this." Aaron blinked. "What?" I set my keys down, looked him in the eye, and said it again. "They chose this. Every time they took from me without thanks. Every time they laughed off my boundaries. Every time they acted like I owed them my life for being born. You're being cruel, he whispered. I leaned back against the counter. No, I'm being done. He stared at me for a long time. And for once, maybe the first time in years, he had no snappy comeback. Then quietly, Mom said, "You changed." I smiled. Yeah, I finally did. That night, I didn't answer any more calls. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, pulled Rosie into my lap, and sat by the window, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. It was peaceful, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long because 3 days later, I received a certified letter from my parents' attorney. And what was inside? Well, that's when things got really interesting. The envelope sat on my kitchen table for 2 hours before I opened it. Not because I was nervous, though. To be honest, my stomach was doing the occasional somersault, but because I wanted to be calm, measured, collected. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me panic, even if they couldn't see me. It came in a thick ivory envelope with my full name typed in bold font. Return address, a local family law firm I'd heard of but never dealt with. I made a mental note, so they didn't use my lawyer. Interesting. I sliced the envelope open with a butter knife and pulled out a neat stack of legal documents. At the top, request for family mediation and emergency relief. I almost laughed. There was no lawsuit, no threats, no formal eviction challenge. It wasn't even a cease and desist. It was a plea dressed up in legalese. They wanted mediation, an official sit-down with lawyers present to discuss what they called a breakdown in familial cooperation and financial understanding. They claimed the house transfer had been coerced, that they were misled into signing over the deed during a time of financial distress, and that they were now facing homelessness due to miscommunication. But the best part, the part that had me actually setting the papers down to process what I was reading, was a request at the bottom of the letter, a proposed agreement. They wanted me to revert the deed back into their name, resume financial responsibility for the property until they could stabilize, agree not to rent, sell, or lease the home without mutual consent, and, get this, provide a formal apology. In writing. Yes, you read that right. They wanted me to apologize. After nearly a decade of carrying them, of funding their lifestyle, of being treated like a bottomless ATM with zero emotional return, they wanted me to say sorry. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. Almost. I took a deep breath, walked over to my bookshelf, and pulled out the folder containing every receipt, statement, and bank transaction linked to that house. I had it all: mortgage payments, repair bills, utility transfers, the notarized deed. Even screenshots of the texts where Dad had practically begged me to take over the house, claiming it would only be until they got back on their feet. I hadn't planned to go to war with my family. But if they wanted to play this out in front of attorneys, I would meet them in the arena, and I wouldn't come unarmed. I forwarded the entire document package to my lawyer, Lydia, with a single sentence: "Looks like the circus is coming to town." She called me 10 minutes later laughing. "I thought you were joking." "Dead serious. You know they don't have a case, right? You've got more than enough documentation to prove ownership and responsibility." "I know," I said. "But they're not doing this to win. They're doing it to pressure me, to make it public, to shame me into backing down." "Well," she said, her tone turning sharp, "that's not going to happen." The mediation was scheduled for the following Wednesday. I showed up in a fitted navy suit. Not flashy, just competent, capable, everything they always claimed. I wasn't emotional enough to be. Lydia met me in the lobby of the law office downtown and handed me a copy of the binder she'd prepped. It had labeled tabs, color-coded evidence, and an entire section simply titled Entitlements and Transfers 2017 to 2025. I glanced at her. "You really did all this in 3 days?" She smirked. "I don't like bullies, especially ones who raise their victims." We walked into the conference room together. And there they were. Mom in her usual pastel cardigan, clutching a tissue dramatically like we were filming a daytime soap. Dad in his faded collared shirt, already red in the face. Aaron sat behind them, arms crossed, looking annoyed to even be present. They didn't greet me. Neither did their lawyer, a middle-aged man with thick glasses and a tired look in his eyes, like he already regretted taking the case. The meeting started off civil. The mediator, a woman named Beth, tried to set a tone of cooperation, but 10 minutes in, Mom started tearing up. "We just don't understand why she would do this to her own parents." "I asked you to watch my dog," I said flatly. "That was the one favor I needed." "After 10 years, that's not the point," Dad cut in. "You could have talked to us. You blindsided us like we were strangers." "You are strangers," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Strangers don't get to spend 10 years draining someone and still act surprised when the well runs dry." Aaron scoffed. "So, this is revenge?" Lydia cut in smoothly. "This is legal clarity. My client owns the property, has proof of every payment made, and is well within her rights to lease the house. The notice was filed legally. The tenants are moving in next week. This meeting is not a negotiation. Their lawyer tried to argue coercion again, that they didn't understand what they were signing years ago, but I had a signed document from their own notary stating it was voluntary. It was like watching a house of cards fall in slow motion, and then Mom did something I wasn't expecting. She stood up quietly, pulled something from her purse, a photo, a little framed picture of me as a kid, sitting on Dad's shoulders, all sunburnt cheeks and missing teeth. She placed it on the table like it was evidence that little girl used to love her family. I looked at the picture, then at her. That little girl, I said, grew up and realized love is a two-way street. The silence in the room was so complete, I could hear the wall clock ticking. Beth cleared her throat. Unless there are new facts to be presented, I believe this concludes the session. Mom didn't cry this time. She just stared at me as if waiting for me to crack, to change my mind, to be the daughter they imagined. I was the quiet little girl who said yes every time they asked, no matter how much it cost. But I didn't. I stood, packed my folder, and walked out, but as Lydia and I stepped into the elevator, I glanced over and noticed Aaron still sitting at the table. He was staring at the photo. And for the first time, I saw something in his face that surprised me. Not anger, not annoyance, guilt. And that's when I realized maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one who had finally grown up. The following weekend, I drove out to the house. It felt strange, pulling into the driveway like I was visiting someone else's home. The lawn was overgrown. Patches of crabgrass choking what had once been Mom's prized flower beds. The porch swing I'd installed now hung lopsided, one of the chains barely clinging to its bolt. It was like the house had decided to match the people living inside, neglected, entitled, and slowly falling apart. I parked and stepped out. The moving truck was already there, engine idling at the curb. A pair of movers leaned against the side, sipping coffee and checking their phones. One of them nodded to me. "You're Leah?" I nodded. "All right, they've been stalling. Told us to wait until you arrived." I sighed. Of course they did. I walked up the front steps and knocked. There was no answer at first, just muffled voices behind the door. Then it swung open. Aaron stood there. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, dark circles under his eyes. "You actually came," he said, folding his arms. "Someone has to sign the papers." He stepped aside, and I entered. The house looked smaller somehow. The light seemed dimmer, the furniture older, without the illusion of control and guilt holding it all together. It was just a worn-out space filled with people who had stayed too long and tried too little. Dad was sitting in his recliner, arms crossed, eyes locked on the TV, even though it was turned off. Mom stood nearby, her back to me, clutching a small porcelain angel she used to keep on the mantel. It had a chipped wing. Nobody spoke at first. Finally, I cleared my throat and said, "The movers are ready. Lease agreement goes into effect tomorrow. I gave you 5 extra days. You're welcome." Mom turned, eyes glassy but dry. "You really hate us that much?" I stared at her. "No. If I hated you, I would have sold this place to a developer and let them bulldoze it." "Then why?" she asked, voice quiet now. "Why are you doing this?" I took a deep breath. "Because you taught me that family means sacrifice. And I believe that for years I gave everything I had to support this household. I skipped vacations, pushed off relationships, ignored my own burnout, all because I thought it was what a good daughter does. But when I finally asked for one simple thing, you laughed in my face like I was some spoiled child asking for candy instead of the woman who paid your mortgage and your medical bills." Dad looked away. I turned back to Mom, and when I drew a boundary, you didn't apologize. You didn't ask to talk. You tried to sue me. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. I nodded toward the hallway. "You've had time to pack. If you need the movers to help, they're outside." Aaron spoke up then, stepping into the living room. "You know they won't make it on their own, right? They don't have jobs, Leah. No savings. They were counting on you forever." I looked at him. "I know. Then what happens next?" "They figure it out." "That's cold." "No," I said, "that's adulthood." She looked like she wanted to argue, but then her eyes dropped. She sighed. "I tried to get them to listen after the mediation. Told them to apologize, to be honest. But you know how they are." "I do. They're not going to change. Then they'll learn the hard way." There was a long pause. "Then," Aaron said, "I found a place. Tiny 1-bedroom. I'm moving out today, too." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think you'd go through with it." He shrugged. "Figured it was time. I've been coasting off them same as they've been coasting off you, and I'm tired of it." A beat passed. "You know," he added, "I always thought you were just the serious one, the boring sibling, but you were just carrying the weight." I gave a half smile. Better late than never. The movers entered then, and the house came alive with motion. Boxes thumped onto the floor. Furniture scraped against the walls. Years of clutter and entitlement were finally being cleared out. As the couch was lifted through the door, Mom looked at me and said, "Where are we even supposed to go?" I didn't flinch. "You'll figure it out." Like I had to, that was the last thing I said to her. 3 hours later, the truck pulled away, carrying their belongings to whatever temporary place Aaron had managed to arrange for them. He told me it wasn't glamorous, a short-term rental outside of town, but it had walls, heat, and just enough space for two people who needed to learn how to live within their means. As for the house, I stood alone in it for a while after they left. It was oddly quiet, peaceful, like it had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. The next day, the new tenants arrived. A young couple in their early 30s, both teachers, pregnant with their first child. When I handed them the keys, the woman smiled and said, "We'll take good care of it." I believed her. I drove home afterward to my real home, the one with Rosie curled on the couch in silence that didn't feel heavy. I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and opened a letter Erin had slipped into my hand as she left. It read, "Leah, I know I don't deserve your trust or your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that watching you stand up for yourself made me realize how much I've been hiding from my own life. You didn't destroy the family. You just stopped letting it destroy you. Thank you for that." I folded the letter and slid it into the back of my bookshelf next to the deed. Not as evidence, but as closure. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the safety net. I was just a woman who'd finally reclaimed her peace. And this time, I wasn't giving it back.